Thank you very much, Vladimir, for this introduction, kind introduction. Is it better if I hold the microphone lower? Because I think there is an echo. Is it better like this? Yeah? All right. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be here. And I'm here, I guess, to take you out before the tea break. Because I think you've had a lot of discussions already in your disciplines. My point today is to take you out virtually, out to the city, and literally out of your discipline. So, we're talking about cities, and every city has an identity. Every city has a spirit, if we can say, or maybe every city has a brand. And the way we recognize a city is usually by the skylines, or maybe their landmark buildings, more or less remarkable, perhaps not as Shanghai, or maybe just the flair of the city. So, the way we perceive city actually is a very interesting process to basically understand how this image is built and created in our own minds. And this very much process is actually an interesting place to begin our discussion about urban semiotics. We believe that the city actually is material for a semiotic analysis. Oops. For instance, what's in a city block? What can we derive as interesting information by looking at patterns in the city? This block, 800 by 800 meters, is a very typical unit of development in China. What does it tell about the Chinese historical context, but as well as the country's economical development? Street level, what kind of information can we derive from looking at the street? This very much perspective enables us to look at lifestyles, but also at social realities. And the sign. The city is scattered with little signs. We can actually look at plenty of meanings, but let's start with one. Does anyone know what this is? This beautiful little Chinese artifact. Take a guess. I'm sorry? A penny flower? A Chinese? Oh, okay. Well, good guess, but no. Yes, please. What it is. Exactly, what it is, yeah. So a cover for? Yeah. It's actually a cover for a chamber pot. Yeah. So the chamber pot, what does that hold for us? Of course, if you go to a place like Shanghai, very modern city, basically this is a symbol that this modern city, behind the very luxuriant streets of Nanjinglu or all the places you might have been, still holds lots of places where lack of sanitation is actually a real social reality that you still have in the city. So these very little signs tell us a story. A story also where you don't have a problem taking your chamber pot outside in your pajamas and taking the city and the street as a very public but also yet private space. What is it? This one's easy, yeah? Yes, very well, very well. This is an exercise. This is the outdoor gym. So where, you go and from, having put your chamber pot outside, and then you have, of course, your pajamas. I'm making jokes here, but it's really to kind of understand that actually this is a very, very unique element of Chinese cities. The outdoor gym. You don't have to go to the gym. You go to the park, you go to the street, and then you exercise. Health is a very, very important topic in Chinese lifestyles, and therefore it is also fine and completely integrated in the urban. Here is a very other simple science, cardboard paper, very simple, it's waste. But what does the waste also tell us? As a very simple sign that we will see everywhere, that actually it tells a story, the story of this huge informal sector that is actually making this whole recycling economy work in China. One of the most effective systems, of course, because based on individual collectors, on private little enterprises that are making this waste, as we see it, actually a resource. Why we are here today talking about the urban is actually because of what we just saw. We take the city as a text to read. We see the city has its own language, and we believe that actually we can decode this urban code. Some consider, of course, this as urban semiotics, really looking at what are the physical elements of the city telling us about social realities, about the cultural context. But also, we could also look at it vice versa. How does actually the urban form impact our social realities and the social fabric of the city? So our aim today is to tell you a little bit of our approach. How would we decode cities? Our approach is fairly simple. As Shanghai Flaneur, you might have guessed, is actually Shanghai Flaneur being a product of our service of our company, is basically by walking, and flannery in particular. And why we believe it is interesting also to link it to your topic is because all this information that is held in the city, talking about the context, the historical development, the economical framework, the social realities, the lifestyle, all these elements can be important and interesting for branding of products, for positioning of products, for development of new services. And this is what we will share in our case studies as well. But taking the very first methodology, we believe that flannery is a very interesting concept to go about. So what is it exactly? Of course, the concept was coined by Charles Baudelaire, a French poet, as he was walking as a slow wanderer in the street of modernizing Paris in the 19th century. This concept of flannery means, in English, a stroller, a wanderer. It's not really the perfect English translation, but in French, the mot flaneur is actually a very sensitive topic and a very all-encompassing phenomenon. It is, and it was at that time, the idea of the flaneur to go around the city and understand urban form, understand the lifestyle, the everyday life, but also understanding the modernity and urban phenomena. It was further popularized by Walter Benjamin, which is the German philosopher from the 20th century, and now actually this is a concept which is really much in the scholarly topic. Just to give you a very short impression of what that is going without a name through the city with infinite investigation, all your senses open, and that is very important, an open-minded spirit, which is all counts. So what we think is important in flannery and walking is, of course, it is a help for us to understand the context. It is a multisensory, as I just mentioned, all senses open, being very observant, but it is also a tool for experiential learning. So it be the learning for purposes of about brands, about markets, about context, but it is an experiential learning. And it is also about shifting perspectives. If I am exactly sharing the same street as my potential customers and I see things differently than doing desktop research, and that doesn't have to do just for branding, but also even urban planners nowadays do most of their work from their desktops, copy-pasting floor plans instead of going out in the urban, especially in China. Walking is also about generating your own urban or mental map, actually. And this is a little bit what Florent is also doing here. As we are speaking, he's creating and he's interpreting what we are talking about and decoding what we've just mentioned into something that is its own mental map. It could look like that, basically. As you see, the river of intercity perception. It is all about perception, and this is what we make out of our flannery. Now, how to illustrate? I'll take a very simple case of the rapid urbanization in China, since this is a defining trend for Chinese society currently, and looking at a very particular aspect of housing. How could we decode this element? This is a very typical physical structure you will see here in Shanghai. This is actually a building form that appeared beginning of the 20th century during the concessions time, so basically when Shanghai was split between the former French concession, the British and the international settlement. But this particular part is a very unique building form. It's called the Lilong. Alleyways gated around by shops on the streets, but actually very small communities which basically make a block. Those lilongs are, so to say, semi-public and private places, because this place has been really created as a community place. So you have elements in between those alleys which actually people take as private spaces. Now, what is very important in looking at this view of the picture is that this is a building form that blends the west and the east. The eastern courtyard, as you see in Beijing, the courtyard, the hutongs, are the traditional building forms. They are blended here, those courtyards, together with the version of during the Industrial Revolution with the housing in Britain. And this is actually an interesting way to decode the layers of history in the city. What happens in those semi-public private places I just mentioned to you, as you can see, what do you see on the pictures? People are taking ownership of the public space. They're hanging their clothes, they're washing their veggies, they're doing all kinds of things outside in these many places. And what is interesting about this form, of course, certain theorists would say that actually in Chinese cities, these forms of semi-private are actually very, let's say, connotative of the fact that family comes first. Family and community comes first. Whereas in Europe, you would have more open spaces, such as plazas and places and squares. In China, you would have more secluded places, which would reflect the fact that actually, Western society would have a more associative civil society, whereas here, the focus might be more on community and family. So this is an interpretation, of course, that urban semiotists such as Dieter Hassenpflug or others are making about these building forms and how they actually impact the society. This is a very clear sign that you might have seen around by walking in a city. Of course, the first meaning of Cai is basically the idea of this demolition. So we are here in front of a building that will be demolished. What does it mean? Very clearly, it means just that, it will be demolished, but it also means just that, the next picture, and how it looks like. And of course, one could see the lilong structures I just mentioned to you, which are, of course, cultural heritage and historical heritage being demolished and going away. It is, of course, progress. It is modernity. It is making way to the new buildings you see behind, to a better sanitation, and, of course, all this progress that come along with the new lifestyle for the population. But it also means a loss of a certain heritage. Perhaps in the Western eye, the heritage is something that we really much consider carefully when looking at building structures, but actually in China, heritage might have more, let's say, an importance in the written word than in the physical structures. And the progress and modernity is actually the most important here. And this makes way to the next interesting let's say, pattern of China's urbanization, which is the gated community. Now, of course, I've selected one that is just behind of the Moganshan area. Normally, you don't see graffitis like that in Chinese cities. Huh? Don't get me wrong. This is very special because it's Moganshan and it's the artistic area. What is interesting is, of course, the building form that you see in the back. What does it connotate? It connotates, of course, progress, modernity, affluence, middle class, basically some kind of progress, but it also led us to interpret how Chinese society is changing. We've just seen people being moved from the Lilong, from the city center, to outskirts. We've seen communities that are basically being disconnected. We see also people moving up. Where is the public space where you actually, you know, wash your dishes next to each other or have this kind of semi-public, private kind of places? In these individual towers, which of course is progress and it's individual, but it's also more individualized. So we see here a different social fabric being created, and that is also what we can see in most of the Chinese cities. The gated community, by the way, is also for a flaneur a very bad thing. They're gated, you can't walk through. So, now to the applications, and to make it very concrete, of course, flaneury is nice, you walk without an aim. And you do that for maybe observation purposes, for art production, for all kinds of things, for creation, for other methodologies. But actually the way we apply walking and flânery with our customers is actually very concrete. For instance, we have done many projects for one client called Evonik. It's a big chemical company. Last time, basically they come every year and do walks with us with their boards of directors. They want to know about urbanization and how this trend really reflects into their business. So they have a team of corporate foresight, meaning really looking at what are the next mega trends, globalization, urbanization. And so we design an investigation to the urban realm, looking at exactly that. What are the signs, the patterns we can learn from? What is the information we can gather from the urban development of China to understand how this impacts their own business possibilities and for, of course, their future corporate development in China. So it's very concrete, chemical industry, urbanization, corporate foresight. Next project, Henkel, again, a German chemical company. I know we work with a lot of German chemical companies. They came with their, this one in this case, it's the beauty care products division. So they are working on new products, shampoos, all kinds of stuff. And they were interested with their R&D team. They came here with hundreds global leaders, but for the R&D team, we did actually something special. We looked at sustainability in the city. So we did a tour, looked at the different urban gardening projects, different eco parks that are starting, looking at new boutiques, people coming up with new products, you know, eco-friendly shampoos. I mean, all the stuff they are trying to learn globally, and they come to Shanghai to understand it, how it works locally. It is interesting that Shanghai is becoming really a place for investigations for many global trends and for global companies. So this was really a targeted investigations, and along this route in the city, we met a lot of experts. Chinese entrepreneurs who are working on the topic, people who are designing products and so on, in order to get them. So it's a bit of, so to say, trend scouting. So here it's sustainability, trend scouting, again for a chemical company. Aesthetics. We didn't actually talk about it, but of course flânery has a very sensory appeal, and then looking around in the city, you can be really like looking at a lot of aesthetics elements. And one walk we did was actually for the company DM. It's also a German company. They are a supermarket brand, and they're distributing lots of products. Now they came to China in order to understand, you know, or to get inspiration. So the idea is like, how do I get inspired by Eastern beauty and Chinese aesthetics? So we went through a lot of, you know, more like traditional building elements like this one, up to really like, you know, temples and different elements of new and modern Chinese aesthetics in order to give them inspiration. So in this case, it's really more like a case of, okay, how do I develop new products? How do I get inspiration? And in this case, it is really about, you know, just an inspiring creative process for a distributor. Another project we did was for Audi, car manufacturer, and actually they come every year with their academy. So again, still like, you know, different times we have different topics. One program we did was from Baozi to Bauma, Baozi being the little bun that you eat on the street, and Bauma being actually a BMW. The idea was to look at, you know, street level analysis for Audi. How do you make research? So of course we went to eat the small bun, and we went to look at what kind of cars people drive. And the idea was to get, of course, you know, an insight on the Chinese car market. What better thing to do it in here in Shanghai, where you have, of course, all kinds of, you know, habits you can exemplify or get information about for your next car design or for your next campaign. So that is really much about, you know, again, trend scouting, understanding the Chinese customer, and seeing how you can apply that. Last case, but not least, this was the last one we did, so that's why it's here. Those chairs are not here like by chance. We put them there. This was for a company called Givenchy. You might know them, French luxury group, and they came with their boards of directors, and the topic was, we want to understand how China thinks. So how does China think, and how can we make business better in China? Yeah? How do I understand my business partners? So I want to learn about Confucianism, Taoism, and how this leadership nowadays is using these concepts of Chinese traditional philosophy. So we had a whole program with different experts, of course, lecturers on the topic, and we had this around the old city. The idea was to look at, looking at the treasures of Shanghai that is being, as you see, now demolished, looking at change, because of course the topic is very, very often in the companies how to do change management. So we looked also at symbolics in terms of, in the physical, the change in the environment and what it could mean in the business. Of course it is associative, yeah? But most of our program work like that. We walk in the urban and we associate and we have discussions around that with experts, for example here, on Chinese leadership and mentality in the business world. And of course, glamour oblige, we have put some nice chairs and had a glass of champagne overlooking this, it's a bit of a, so to say, opposition here. Now you will tell me, of course, this is nice, but this is not very serious, and I agree. We have lots of fun. What can you do? But there is actually a science being developed behind this, not by Flannery just itself, but it is actually walking in general, and there are quite a lot of actually scholars in Germany. It started really in Germany in the 80s, and people look at really walking as a methodology. Of course, for art production and creation, but also for other purposes. I mean, we have one professor we work with, Sasha Kagan. He's a cultural theorist, and he's really working on art and sustainability. So how can you use walking in the city also as a means to really raise awareness about issues of climate change and so forth, engage people in society? So it really comes back again to the notion of flaneur from Baudelaire, which is, how do you participate and partake in the city? It's not only just about strolling, but how do you participate? And we have more and more people who are really into the walking topic as a methodology. Of course, it's very clear that like the Lucius Burckhardt, who is the one who really invented or like coined the term strollology, or like Spaziergangswissenschaft, which is in German actually the Promenadologie, like really the science of walking, and he's more from the urban studies. It makes sense that from a disciplinary point of view, this is anchored in the urban planning and architecture, but actually more and more other disciplines are using walking as a methodology. So I hope I could inspire you with walking, and this is basically a summary of what we think walking is good for. Of course, getting orientation, and I think a few people from you here are first time in Shanghai maybe, and I hope you can go around, scroll around, and get some orientation. But also we believe that it is a good tool for local awareness, for understanding the context especially. And from this understanding the context, we believe that also our customers can get some information, get some inspiration for the daily business and the core business. And perhaps this is something also we could see and debate whether this is something that can be inputted also in your discipline. Investigating, reflecting, but most of it is observing. So walk with us on Sunday.